No U.S. residents
I'm
were
not going to
reported.
argue with you on that.
Well, there's not an argument, but don't say we deported U.S. residents, because we didn't. I don't deport anybody.
I'm not asking.
But we didn't deport U.S. residents.
I'm asking you whether we can see the details of the arrangements, including the funding details.
She doesn't want the truth. She just wants her bias confirmed. Marco Rubio and Patty Murphy are clashing currently over USAID funding, El Salvador counter-narcotic programs, foreign aid authority, and whether billions in taxpayer dollars are either being protected or exposed.
You have overseen a systemic campaign to dismantle USAID, impound billions of dollars that this committee actually provided, and unilaterally remake the Department of State without the slightest bit of concern that you lack the authority to do that without Congress. It has created chaos, it's caused preventable deaths across the globe, and it has undermined American leadership. As Ranking Member Schatz noted, what you've done is outright illegal, a complete violation of bipartisan appropriation laws, the Impoundment Control Act, and the Anti-Deficiency Act. Within hours of taking office, President Trump halted all foreign aid in flagrant defiance of the law. Now, under your watch, Secretary Rubio, that freeze was implemented with chaos and cruelty. And then you illegally shuttered USAID, placing everyone on leave, halting life-saving work, literally locking people out of the building and out of their devices, even in dangerous corners of our world. You paid people not to work, abandoned our partners across the globe, and chaotically recalled global staff, putting more than 1,600 Americans who served our country abroad in limbo.
So we have a massive problem with fraud, abuse, and waste in our federal government here, okay? And a lot of the programs that were set up were kind of like backdoor type of programs where I will, in fact, do exactly what you want if you, sign off on this one specific thing kind of that's happening over here, right? So we know that a good amount of the USAID programs were kind of made like that here, like backdoor type of programs. This is the reason why so many of the programs that were being funded were absolute trash, right? They have nothing to do with what the American people actually want. Be aware of that here. And or went against the actual cultural norms of some of the regions that these programs are being put into. Of course, by default, Trump gets into office, and what does he immediately do? This is all weird stuff. Hold on. Before we keep spending money on whatever this backdoor, cloak and dagger, wash this hand, I'll wash that hand type of programs, okay? Whatever that is, let's freeze it for a second. Let's see where this goes, and we'll comb through this with a fine-tooth comb, guys. That's basically what has happened here.
And when you shut down the USAID payment system, you even refused to pay for services provided before the illegal freeze. You fought all the way to the Supreme Court, against paying for services U.S. businesses already rendered with funding that Congress already provided. And I know you know, Mr. Secretary, but you lost. And I assume you need the reminder because to this day, you have not made all the payments that are required by our nation's highest court. And as a result, American companies continue to lay off American workers. And by the way, you do continue to lose in court, including just yesterday over your move to illegally replace the U.S. Institute of Peace Leadership.
Oh, she hates him.
And recent cases over international broadcasting. Now, eventually, Mr. Secretary, you sent Congress notice of your intent to collapse the USAID into state. Only you didn't consult with this committee. That's required by law. It came without justification, also required by law, and it came long after USAID was reduced to rubble. So sadly, disregard for our laws and values, to me, has sort of become a pattern of your tenor, revoking visas when someone writes an op-ed you don't like, or reaching a secret deal to use taxpayer dollars to jail U.S. residents in a notorious foreign prison, no due process, or pointlessly leaving food assistance to rot in storage. Actually, in Dubai, we now have 500 tons of high-energy biscuits that expire in July. They're bought, they're shipped, they're stored, all at taxpayer expense. But you've condemned them to waste, and that is one example of many. Now, another pattern that I'm deeply worried about is transparency. We have pressed you for information. Our staffs have sent you countless emails and briefing requests, so we can do our job here. There are hundreds of unanswered requests and no effort to address them. And Mr. Secretary, that's got to change. Even your plan to reorganize the State Department came with no information on the 270 offices you are moving to eliminate, the proposed layoffs, or how USAID would be merged into state. I won't ask you whether impounding billions of dollars is legal. It is not. I won't ask you whether it's efficient to pay people not to work or fire them without determining staffing needs. But, and I won't ask you if cutting 91% of our counter-narcotic and law enforcement programs make us safer, abruptly abandoning agreements with allies makes us stronger, or ceding our global leadership to China makes us more prosperous.
Okay, so we're kind of like circling the drain here. Like, listen, some of the points that she definitely made were incredibly valid, but she seems not to be fully aware of a couple of things here. If there is waste, fraud, and abuse running rampant in our federal government, running rampant within some of the contracts that were basically signed with our allies, with other people in other countries here, understand this here. There's kind of going to be a storm, let's call it here, before the actual calm. I'm going to go ahead and reverse the age-old idiom here, because I think in the context of this here, things are going to get rough before they get better. All right. So obviously, by stepping into office and immediately doing all of these things to basically stop the waste, fraud, and abuse that is all over the place in Washington, okay, there were obviously some programs that were going to be halted. There were obviously going to be some money lost and wasted. But the only thing that matters in the context of this here is that after this, did it get better? Okay, like wasting $1 billion to save 100, I'm fine with. Okay. It is all taxpayer dollars. I understand. But I think if we come to terms with this here, I think we can kind of understand exactly the methodology behind abruptly stopping something so things can immediately become better.
I'd like to respond to your 7-minute speech, which is primarily, I disagree like 99% of it. It's just not true. We've done nothing that's illegal. We've been in over 600 briefings to Congress. We've asked questions. We've answered questions repeatedly. We get hundreds of questions a day. We respond them as quickly as possible. And your characterization of the moves that we made
Mr. Secretary, I would
false.
just tell you, we are here because we need the information so that we can write our budget and on a bipartisan.
Well, you'll have the information you need to write a budget.
Okay, so will we get the details on the El Salvador arrangement? Yes or no?
Well, which Salvador arrangement?
Your agreement that you've made with them about.
Well, what agreement? The president of El Salvador agreed to take in 250 gangbangers, and we sent them.
Funding details we have not gotten. We need to see what the costs are.
Well, we haven't funded that. We've provided them law enforcement assistance. I know you just claimed that we cut all this law enforcement assistance. We provided El Salvador and other countries law enforcement assistance. They have the right to spend that money any way they wish. But they did us a big favor. They took 250 dangerous, trained out. We didn't deport any U.S. residents. No U.S. residents were reported.
I'm not going to argue with you on that.
Well, it's not an argument, but don't say we deported U.S. residents, because we didn't. I don't deport anybody.
I'm not asking.
But we didn't deport U.S. residents.
I'm asking you whether we can see the details of the arrangements, including the funding details.
She doesn't want the truth. She just wants her bias confirmed. That's the overall vibe I'm getting from her.
You whether we can see the details of the arrangements, including the funding details.
I'm giving you the details. The arrangements are we provide law enforcement funding to El Salvador, among other countries. How they choose to spend that money internally is up to them. But I can tell you.
Can you give me the details on the 200-plus offices you're proposing to
Sure, we've
eliminate?
provided that.
We need that. Can I get your commitment to give us those?
It's part of our reorg.
How about the details and justifications of your proposed rescissions from programs you claim are out of alignment with administration priorities? Are we going to get the details of that, funding priorities?
On rescissions and impoundment and things of this nature, that's obviously an OMB function, and I would talk to them about that in regard to what's going to go on with that money. I can tell you the contracts we canceled. And I can list to you the contracts we canceled and the rationale why, because I went through them myself.
Can you get those to us like today? So
the contracts?
Yes, and the funding arrangements that you've made. That's what I'm asking for.
Funding arrangements with who?
For any of the rescissions, for any of the funding, for any of the multiple congressional directives that you have given out, so that we as an appropriations committee can make our funding decisions.
Sure, you're going to have all that information
you.
when you
I
put together a
appreciate that.
budget.
Marco Rubio walked into a room where the entire deck was already stacked against him. She didn't really want him to speak at all. I mean, nothing but hostility coming from her end here. Now, listen, don't get me wrong here. The Senate, Congress specifically, they have the ability, they should have a pretty non-biased, almost cold and calculated kind of delivery when they're speaking to people. But it seemed with her specifically, there was a lot more kind of like behind the scenes outright hatred. All right. I have no idea her political affiliation here at all, but I'm going to go ahead and forecast it's probably not one that is not exclusively baked in Orange Man bad, right? If that makes any sense here, guys, right? But how Marco delivered here, this is our next presidential candidate. That's it. That's kind of where I'm at here. In a room where everyone hates you and you have the ability to kind of stand and kind of still speak with, utter conviction here by saying, a lot of what you're saying doesn't make any sense here. I will say, though, kind of coming from the outside here, some of what she said made sense here. But I get it. Coming from, some of it made sense. But how it was delivered was absolutely just full of nothing more than vitriol. And that kind of loses a gigantic amount of like, do I care what you're saying? Points. If that makes any sense here, bro. It loses a lot of them. If you are in the position where you have the ability to write these gigantic wasteful contracts and you're confused that a president comes in and does not want the waste, fraud, and abuse to consistently run rampant in Washington and within Congress, again, the one hand washes the other type of thing. Like, you understand how many contracts and how many laws were just created because that law got kind of got stuck in another package, and the other side only really wanted that, but the only way they could get that is if they signed off on this. That's all nonsense, bro. All right? Just understand this here. That should not be a thing in Washington. Like, listen, if you do not have conviction to stand up and say, I like this package right here, great, or I don't like it because there are a couple of things, and this is a nasty bill, bro. Right? That happens every single day. Okay? That needs to be corrected. When I say the waste, fraud, and abuse is running rampant, that's kind of what I'm talking about, bro. Imagine some of those absolutely worthless, nothing programs that USAID funded were all most likely some of those packages. They were in some of those packages, and it was probably on like page 96 in small print, bro. Okay, just so you guys are fully aware, that's how things kind of run, bro. All right, that needs to be corrected immediately, please. That's all I can ask. But either way, listen, guys, if you guys are new here, please like and subscribe. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and catch you guys later. Go ahead and watch one of these videos while you're here. Stay around for a while, bro. Hang out. But either way, I'll catch you guys later.